Hey everyone, Darius from Self-Archeology here. In this video, I would like to make a response or an addition to latest Daniel Mackler's video where he talked about intellectual healing and how some people think that his approach to grieving is too intellectual and one should be more physical in their trauma resolution. So there he talked about how animals like zebras or similar animals who get attacked by predators, by lions, by wolves, they run away, and after that they feel that they have to overcome this experience where they got attacked. So they kind of shake it and feel it on a very raw bodily level, and then they move on. They are kind of done with trauma. That's the example that he gave. And I would like to expand on that. I would like to add to that why such metaphors, why such similes are, while sometimes powerful, they are very limited. So one of the most common metaphors that I've heard is comparing people to lobsters and trying to explain why there are hierarchies in social relations among human beings. The theory being that lobsters have hierarchies, therefore human beings have hierarchies and everything's okay. Or the whole idea of beta and alpha in social relationships. This started actually while observing captive wolves and extrapolating that there are group dynamics where some wolves are alpha, some wolves are beta, and later the author has been trying to debunk the whole influence on or of his own research on pop culture for years, because this is not how wolves actually act, and that's definitely not how humans naturally act. And therefore this whole idea that we are similar to animals and making these wild examples and similes and metaphors how animals do some things and human beings are animals, therefore it's the same thing. It's simplistic at best and harmful or stupid at worst. So let's look into it more. But before that, I would like to actually give an example of a useful comparison. So for example, in trying to understand trauma, we can look at pets, for example, dogs. If you beat and abuse a dog, they either become overly aggressive or incredibly intimidated and scared, and you can kind of see a similar relationship dynamic or a similar behavioral pattern in human beings where you abuse a child or you abuse even an adult, and if this abuse is severe enough and if it happens often enough, routinely, then the human being, the child, becomes either overly aggressive to protect themselves, to compensate, or very scared. And this is understandable because that's how trauma affects us. But going back to our example of how to overcome trauma and how we should be more like zebras or more like antelopes or something where they just kind of shake it off and they're done with it, that's not how human beings work. Unfortunately, I wish it were so simple, but that's not how it works. Our psyche is much more advanced. That's not shocking. Probably most people agree. the psychological and emotional process of healing is the core of healing. Of course, it involves physical manifestations and physical release of certain emotions, of certain experiences, but that's not enough. You can kind of do it in some situations. It can be useful, like, I don't know, if you are very anxious, if you're very scared and you have to do something and you're like, oh, you're hulking up, you're like, I can do it, I can do it, I can do it, let's do it. And you go and do it and you succeed and you're like, yay, it worked. That's not how it usually works. You can't overcome trauma like that because trauma is much more complicated than that. And it is for many reasons. But mainly because, again, our psyche is much more complicated than of a zebra. For example, zebras don't have self-awareness. They don't have self-understanding. They don't have a personality as complex as we humans do. For example, to give you a better understanding why human psyche is much more complicated, we have such phenomenon as defense mechanisms, where we develop certain psychological explanations to our behavior, to our thinking, to our feelings, where they are not necessarily rational, they don't reflect reality very well, or they're not even useful. But we still use it. I don't think zebras do that. So to say that we're like zebras is a little too simplistic. Moreover, there are other complicated social mechanisms. For example, human beings experience parasocial relationships. A parasocial relationship is a one-sided relationship where one person extends their energy, their resources, their interest, their time to the other party, which is completely unaware of their existence. So you see that in celebrities, you see that on the internet, where somebody watches hours of videos, of streams, and they think they have a relationship with that person that they are observing. Or human beings have such psychological mechanisms as self-esteem. So for example, if you are a child and people treat you a certain way, you develop certain beliefs about yourself. You might feel that you are not worthy enough, that you can't do something even though you can, and so on. Zebras don't do that. Zebras don't have self-esteem, they don't have ego, they don't have self-awareness to the degree that human beings do. So healing is way more complicated than just shaking off your trauma, shaking off your emotions, or connecting to something on a bodily level. Again, that's necessary, and oftentimes that's an extension of healing, but that's not how healing works. That's not necessarily very helpful, even oftentimes, if it's only limited to this physical somatic experience. And I will talk about the process of healing in the future, but that's it for this video. I hope you found it useful. Talk to you in the future. See ya.